Today is day 2 of the Congressional Hispanic Institute Leadership Conference. That event brings together leaders from across the country to examine issues impacting the Latino community.
This year's theme is You Count, and it serves as a call to action. Joining us to discuss this event and the initiatives the Congressional Hispanic Caucus is focusing on is the Congressman Ruben Gallego of Arizona. He currently serves on the House Armed Services Committee and the Committee on Natural Resources. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Congressman, tell us a little bit about what the CHC is going to be doing in this with this new leadership summit, and then some of the initiatives that you're going to be focused on specifically now that you're back in session.
Well, specifically, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute brings leaders from all across the country, young and old, and from all walks of life and all types of industries, to basically train them to be leaders in their communities and in the community as a whole. Specifically this year, we're actually focusing on the census. And that's because it's going to be actually probably one of the most important census in the history of the Latino community here in Arizona, here in the country, I should say. And there was specific actions by this presidency to try to actually diminish our power by adding the citizenship question. So we know that this is going to be an important census. This is why we're very engaged as a caucus, but importantly as an institute, training leaders from all across the country to make sure that they respond and help out with the census.
Are people in the Hispanic community, are they nervous at all about participating in the census?
Well, back in 2010, in the last census, there was some both confusion as well as nervousness regarding the census, where that information will be held secret like it has in the past and won't be used by the government to basically track down people. I think there is still some of that fear, unfortunately, especially this administration that really has no norms or boundaries. And in the past, I think it'd be easier for many of us to say that, of course, that would never happen. But we believe that no matter what, that this census needs to happen, that every Latino, every person, every poor person needs to actually come out and make sure they're counted. It's our right, it's our duty as Americans to do it, and we're not going to let this presidency or any presidency scare us.
So, Congressman, you are also a United States Marine. You've been highly critical today of the president's plan to try and invite Taliban leaders to Camp David. You also are, however, a supporter of a peace deal. Ultimately, what do you want to see as the way forward in Afghanistan? Today is the anniversary, the 18th anniversary of the attacks on 9/11.
Honestly, what I'd like to see is for us to just get out of there. Our goals and objectives are done. We have established an Afghan government, Afghan army that should be able to take care of itself. We would still be able to project power into Afghanistan if they try to establish more safe havens for terrorist organizations. Let's not forget, it was men with box cutters that brought us down. It wasn't an organized army. So we have to obviously be on the lookout to stop safe havens. But being in Afghanistan is against our national interests. It's draining our treasury. It's draining our military. The only winners that really come out of this by us being bogged down in Afghanistan is Russia and China. So we need to move there. Now, what the president did was wrong. You should not be inviting the Taliban to the United States, especially Camp David, around at any point, but especially around 9/11. It just shows you how self-centered he is, that all he cares about was the big win, not the fact that how much hurt it would cause so many Americans that are still hurting 18 years later from September 11th.
Congressman, are you encouraged by the firing of National Security Advisor John Bolton? It seems that the president largely agrees with you on this.
Absolutely. I think John Bolton is a terrible human being. He has caused the death of millions of Iraqis and thousands of U.S. Soldiers and personnel, including many of my friends. His neocon way of thinking is very dangerous to this country, and I hope he's never employed in the United States government or by actually any entity that has to do with foreign policy. I agree with the president. I don't know what his intent was in hiring him in the first place or why he fired him, but at least the good outcome is that John Bolton is no longer close to any level of power.
Congressman, as an Iraq War veteran, I mean, what are you thinking about on this anniversary of 9/11? What should we learn from the American response? What mistakes were made?
Well, as an Iraq War veteran, number one, I remember that we should never have been in Iraq. I'm proud of my service. I'm proud of being a Marine. But Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, and the fact that the Bush administration, Bolton, and a bunch of the neocons basically lied this country into war and destroyed essentially the Middle East and thousands of American lives in the process is what I'm reminded of. The other thing that reminds me of right now that there's a young man or young woman that's in boot camp that was born before, starting pretty soon, that was born even before, or after, I should say, September 11th, and they're about to go to boot camp, and eventually they're going to end up in Afghanistan. 18 years later, we're still bogged down, and again, it's against our national interest for us to be there, and we should figure out a way as fast as possible to pull out.
Congressman, while we have you, you're a progressive. You are a United States Marine. Your endorsement could matter quite a bit in this race. What are you thinking whenever you look for the next Democratic debate tomorrow?
Well, look, I think for me, what I really want to find is the nice nice patch where it's a compromise between someone who's definitely going to beat Donald Trump, but also is going to have a strong progressive agenda and who has a history of pushing a strong progressive agenda. And tomorrow I think I'll see that in the debate, and I look forward to talking about it afterwards.
We just got some new polling numbers from Univision about the Latino community, who they're supporting for the presidency. Found that Bernie Sanders has the highest favorability rating of any of the candidates. He and Joe Biden are statistically tied for first place nationally among Latinos, according again to this Univision poll. What do you make of that appeal?
Well, I think the reason they're going to have good, both of them, and not to speak ill of either of them, the Latino community does look to people that they've known and seen. They have gotten to learn Bernie Sanders because of the last election, as well as all his continuous work. Of course, they know Vice President Biden because of his tenure under President Obama, or with President Obama. I think also it shows you people that are very interested in elections this year, and it also shows one thing that I think people are also forgetting, that the Latino community is becoming more and more partisan. And I've seen this happening in Arizona. As the Republicans have increased their rhetoric, their anti-Latino rhetoric, their racist rhetoric, Latinos who tended to go 70-30, 70% Democrat, 30% Republican, are now going lower and lower in terms of their voting propensity for Republicans. And when that happens, they start looking at Democrats a lot stronger. And this is why you see this great reaction, I think, to both Sanders and Vice President Biden.
So, Congressman, you're not ready to make an endorsement on our show right here, right now?
No, you guys are going to have to do better than that.
All right, come back and let us know. Congressman, thank you so much. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Coming up on Rising, as we've said, today is the 18th anniversary of 9/11, but our next guest has a very different perspective on the attacks.
She was in high school that was blocks away from the Twin Towers when they fell, and 18 years later, she's still fighting for health care coverage to deal with the toxic exposure. Her story is next on Rising.